Hello and welcome to the CX Files for April 3rd, 2025. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And we have a special guest who I will let introduce himself.
Hi, Mark. This is Stephen Loynd, the TrendzOwl, coming to you from Northern Virginia, just across the Potomac from a chaotic Washington, D.C. And it's a real honor and joy to be here with you today.
It's fantastic to have you, Steve. And of course, Peter is normally here. And in fact, I don't think Peter's ever missed a show since we started doing this together. But he's been a bit ill over the past week or so. So hopefully he's there in bed with his headphones in, listening to us. And we'll look forward to his return next week. Now, we're going to talk about GigCX this week because recently I talked to Chris Dumpleton, who's the Chief Sales Officer at Limitless. Chris is based over in London, and we had a good chat about this. And this came about because I saw some of the stuff Limitless was sharing recently on LinkedIn. They did some interesting sort of analysis of the entire CX market in 2024. And they were kind of pointing out that one of the big trends going on is it's not just AI, but it's other sort of innovation around AI as well, which involves things like outcome-based pricing, for example. So what's your experience of GigCX, Steve? I mean, how much have you seen of this in the marketplace?
Yeah, I like the way you put it there, Mark. In the age of AI, there's things happening around AI that are very much human-centric, particularly at a time when there's a lot of chaos and discombobulation in so many ways in the global economy with everything that's going on. The ability to shift and adapt. I mean, me stepping in here for Peter is maybe a metaphor for the kind of resilience and flexibility that organizations need and that employees are demanding more and more. And so I think that the gig model, kind of the on-demand model in its proper place, is an important part of operational strategy, or can be effectively designed. It can be a great way to step in with enthusiastic brand ambassadors and who oftentimes are great fans of brands themselves. And so if you can get them on the line with a customer at an elevated level of performance, you're going to see great benefits perhaps to the organization.
Yeah, and this is something that I talked to Chris about because one of the first things that people say when they've never encountered this kind of work before, like using the gig economy for CX, is like, how do you get the agents motivated? I mean, you're trying to get people to work for you on a customer service process, but you're not training them. You're not managing them. You're not telling them they need to be in the office 9 to 5 or anything like this. And yet, the people who work in this way, they turn around and say, well, I'm choosing where to work. I'm choosing the hours I work. I'm choosing which brands I'm working with. So, you tell me what works better rather than having to get up in the morning, go to a contact center and then be told, oh, you're not working on that retail brand today because this insurance company is a bit busy. So we're going to move you over. So, you certainly see that there's a shift in the demand of the people that are working in customer service itself, like the agents that have more power.
Yeah, and back to that aforementioned point about we're in this interregnum period that's characterized by volatility and chaos, and mental and physical health are extremely important. And we've been talking about this for at least 5 years now with the pandemic, when home shoring had its great place at center stage. But we can't underestimate the importance of mental health for agents these days, and giving them ability again to be resilient under pressure of such volatile times. I mean, 5 years ago it was COVID, but we don't know if something else might not happen in the same sort of category in the future. And to have people that can manage calls from home um, is offering resilience and flexibility not only for them but for the organization as well. So again, in its proper place, I think it continues to make sense and during crazy times. The other thing I was thinking about is, think of these things can be industry specific as well. Think of an area like gaming where, a customer might want to talk to somebody that knows the space and is enthusiastic about the space. And that's the type of person maybe you want to talk to, a real expert, a subject matter expert in a specific realm. So that's another advantage of this. If you can get somebody on the line that has those qualities, it can redound to the benefit of the customer.
Yeah, I can imagine that if you're like using a service like Vinted or eBay and you're selling products and you're having trouble, then the ability to talk to someone who is also a seller, and knows how that system works, that kind of, it's a completely different experience. You're kind of like working through the problem together rather than, you're calling up customer service and then they're having to look through FAQs to find out the answer.
Yeah, that's right. And the related point that you mentioned earlier about I mean, the exponential progress is amazing. And yet, paradoxically, we're also seeing, again, this word interregnum, meaning that, technology is advancing so quickly, and yet the actual dissemination of the technology through, in this case, the contact center, is a little bit more complex and involved than all the perhaps hype might suggest. And so that's a long way of saying that as we work our way through this period of confusion, you need human beings on the oftentimes to talk to the customer, to address their issue and alleviate their pain and bring some enthusiasm and effectiveness to the exercise.
Yeah, yeah. And you published a book called The Widening Turn last year, I think just a few months ago, and that explored agility and the need for modern businesses to be extremely agile so that they can embrace the kind of innovation that we're seeing at present. Do you think that, this kind of blend of AI plus GigCX this is kind of the answer, I suppose, to the need for customer service processes to find a new way to be much more agile?
Yeah, and it's happening in real time. I think that the operational models are um, they're they're morphing in real time, and some of the avenues, as you suggest, are not just AI, but offerings or models like an on-demand type of a model that can help organizations shift under pressure. So we're seeing the widening turn in real time. I mean, not even I could have anticipated how sort of extreme it would feel, the sharpness, if you will, of the turn with the events over the last year or so. Um, but, regardless of who's in office, the mandate and the urgency has been to turn this giant ship of state to a place that, can compete and remain powerful and relevant in a multinodal world economy. Now, how that's going to progress is anybody's guess, but the effort is there. And this goes back to the point about there's going to be some chaos involved as we go through this shift. And this model is going to help organizations and people adjust.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, just to sort of wrap up then, I just wanted to ask you for your opinion about something. Like the way that Chris was talking about the platform was we're not looking at the idea of, AI will try solving simple problems and then it will kick it to a human if it can't figure it out. It's more like a model of there's AI agents working alongside human agents. So you've got that agentic idea is not that there's technology as a buffer before you get to a human. It's like you've got them working alongside each other, and so the customer might be served by by an AI agent, but then seamlessly handed to a human agent rather than it feeling all kind of disjointed. We're kind of seeing digital employees working alongside human employees, and I guess that makes the whole process much more seamless for a customer who's interacting with this. But at the same time, it sort of raises other questions. I mean, things like income tax and stuff. I mean, where are we going when we might have 5 digital employees working alongside one real employee?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, agentic AI it sort of sees the headlines the last few months, and there's a lot of enthusiasm and hype. Um, and the progress has undoubtedly been so impressive in so many cases to watch and to think about where it's headed. But that meshing with human talent is the most interesting part about it. I mean, if you can get a seamless interplay between those two forces, you've got great potential on the upside for that to happen. Your point about which might be a different topic, which is really interesting. I've been thinking about it too. Is the idea of tariffs, levies, taxes that's in the news these days, obviously. You know, as I understand it, the current tariffs that Trump announced actually exempt services by and large. But then you start to imagine, well, what if that began to change? Like, what would that look like? What would it look like to start to put a levy on different types of services in a global economy? What if, for example, you started to see a tariff, an internal tariff, if you will? I don't know if that term makes sense in this context, but on automation, companies that are using it that is perceived as being, labor, putting pressure on labor. I mean, there's all sorts of really interesting possibilities. But in the meantime, the on-demand model and the meshing of technology with human beings still makes sense and probably will for the foreseeable future.
All right, cool. So why don't we go straight to the interview with Chris Dumpleton from Limitless, this week's guest. Chris, Limitless has been on this podcast before, but the last time was about 3 years ago. So could you just take a moment, just at the beginning here, to introduce the business, let everyone know what you're focused on and what you're doing?
Yep, I would be happy to. Well, whilst Limitless was on the podcast 3 years ago, it wasn't me. So this is my first outing on the CX file. So I'll try and do it. I'll try and do it justice for you, Mark. So if I was in an elevator with someone, they said, "What does Limitless do?" I would do the classic elevator pitch and say we've effectively taken the Uber business model into contact centers. That would get you about one floor down. So imagine this was a long lift. Then I would go into a bit more detail, and that would be that we've taken the freelance economy or the gig economy, whichever way you use it, people interchange. And we've taken that concept to an industry that has been and is still historically a bums on the seat model. And we would rock up to an organization and say, we've got an idea for you, which is that we believe the best people that can answer your customer service inquiries are customers themselves. So we will make it possible for you to route those contacts to crowds of onboarded customers that we've qualified to become experts, and they can answer your other customer inquiries. So it's kind of like a mash between community forums on steroids, but also like outsourcing in terms of KPI management, and you bring those things together, and you've got GigCX or Limitless as the custodian of that.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, just on that, then, do you think that it's still difficult to explain gig CX? People have certain view on the gig economy, I guess.
Yeah.
Is it easier to talk about freelance CX these days?
Yeah, it's funny. We've had a couple of times we've gone, should we call it something else? Because gigs got synonymous sometimes with some bad things, right? But then we thought, well, no, actually, we went out of our way to set what we believe to be the best, like, standard, if you like, around it, because unfortunately there were some organizations out there, and this isn't just in the CX world, this is anywhere, right, that use it as a way to either just pay people the least amount of money. There was that wash, especially in the UK, around zero contract hours, or it's just disguised labor, we're like, no, we are genuinely proud of the standard we want to got. So we called that Good Gig, and we registered it as a name, and we set out, right, what are the things we want to do that's best around it. I won't do the sales pitch on that, but basically it's just about making sure that people are treated fairly. It's not disguised labor. We put checks and balances around it. We reward them, more than they could earn equivalent in the contact center. No barriers to entry and all that wonderful stuff. Uh, so short answer, gig can be a bit of a tricky word, but we took the decision that no, we're gonna use it to our advantage and explain that there is a spectrum, and hopefully we're on the right side of all that.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And I mean, like you just said, GigCX involves working with people. You've got humans in the mix, human agents there. Has this changed at all in the past couple of years? Because we've seen AI become much more prominent in customer service solutions. So is there more of a demand for a mixture now of the tech and human in the GigCX solutions you're looking at?
Yeah, well, I think undoubtedly, yeah. So I think everyone might be getting a little bit bored with this phrase, which is that AI is going to handle the simple stuff, and humans are going to be there to handle the complex stuff. I'm sensing that people are getting bored of that statement. But when I think back, like my history, was in various companies, but I did a big stint in a systems integrator, and I remember the day when we were, announced like a natural language IVR to the world, or the very first chatbot. These huge paradigm shifts are like, wow, this thing is going to wipe out 40% of demand, and this one's going to wipe out 30% of demand. So yes, it's absolutely making a big impact, and the pace of it's quite frightening. And and we're all customers at the end of the day. So yes, it's gonna make a big impact. But I think we've been through these sorts of cycles before. I'm not saying that the cycle is going to slow down or stop, but there is that initial kind of sugar rush of, wow, this is something, wow, that's going to decimate industries, and then it kind of settles a little bit. And I think we're in a bit of that phase at the moment. If I was to say whereabouts we are on the journey.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, certainly in 23, I think a lot of the serious media was talking about the end of contact centers, and there will be no more need for people answering calls. So yeah, I think we've definitely seen a reality check on that anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about the contact center and the BPO environment, when we're designing CX solutions, a lot of the payment terms and the performance metrics, everything still seems to be designed around the contact center. Have you moved on from this? I mean, is the whole thing, or like the idea around GigCX, that you're focused more on outcomes? And how would you explain the difference between what you're measuring or how you're charging compared to a traditional contact center then?
Well, the easiest one on that one's payment terms, and it doesn't matter how you position things. If you have an in-house contact center, then you've got wages, you've got management, you've got infrastructure, you've got building, energy, running costs, and that stuff. You've also got unproductive hours, and optimization, and you've got real-time adherence, and you've got sickness, you've got training, all those sorts of stuff. They all combine to your total cost of ownership. If you outsource that, then they've got that problem, and it's just how they charge it back to you. But someone's still got that problem around efficiency, and the margins in contact centers, and the clue's kind of in the name a little bit, which is 99% of contact centers are cost centers. They are there to serve demand that's arisen as a result of something being sold. And if there weren't any contacts, then maybe that's the best, the utopian state. But that's always the path that people are on. So costs wise, yes, there is a big difference, and the major difference for us is that we are rewarding people for resolving tasks. And it's on a per resolved task basis. They're not being charged. We're not charged. There's no buildings, there's no infrastructure, there's no management costs, and all that stuff. So that means that we're removing a load of that, and productive hours and all those metrics to go. Right, every contact center has a WFO function. They've got a WFM person that's dealing with real time and long term adherence, and they're constantly thinking about, how do I get the most out of my workforce whilst at the same time not overutilizing them beyond 80% so they burn out. And the conveyor belt of trying to find talent, retain them, train them, continues. So that's kind of like we've always done it this way. So doesn't if we turn up like another BPO and say, well, we can do it for 20 cents less, it's like, well, we still got the same problems. In our world, well, we don't need to do those things. It's fundamentally about connecting someone who has a question with someone who's got an answer, and that person just happens to be an existing customer. We've onboarded them, tested, qualified, they've got the capabilities, they've come with the brand knowledge. And at the end of the day, we're all customers. So would you rather your question answered by someone that's got a product or not? And I think we could all, say, yeah, I think I prefer that. So the costs are very much different. Performance metrics are similar in the main ones that we measure and report back is the response time, and that's not just we've got your contacts, we'll be back in 3 days. I mean, actually engagement with an expert. CSAT, or we would call that expert SAT, but we use CSAT because that's what everyone's comfortable with, and then the resolution rate. So those three metrics are the ones that we measure ourselves on, and then organizations come to us and they'll say, well, we also need to measure these things. Can you measure them on our behalf? And we can absolutely do it. But things like everything was about CSAT, then it's about effort score, then it's about NPS, and then it's about first call resolution, and all those. They go through cycles. But sometimes we're asked to sort of report on things like overall net promoter score, and so well, the interaction with the expert may not determine whether they're happy with the overall company or the overall product. The expert could be telling them, yeah, your thing's broken, you need to return it. I'm not happy. Well, that's not a reflection of the expert. They might say, I had the same problem myself. I had to return it, but that's the beauty, if you like, of being a customer around the whole thing. So metrics, yes, there's those three which will always stand the test of time, because that's how we change it. But yeah, commercials is just a straight line between customer, expert. Did they resolve it? If so, then we reward them for doing so.
Okay, yeah, and it's interesting then because you're just paying for a resolution, so each time there's an interaction, there's a payment to the agent and a charge to the client, rather than the traditional just blending everything together and maybe having an FTE cost.
Yeah, the biggest shift in that, Mark, is that and it's one of the big areas that we have to just talk in more detail about when we talk to our clients. In the first point is that there's always this sort of point where people go, so they're not employed? No. So you're not training them. Well, we provide them with some learning that you give us to help them familiarize themselves with some things, but essentially they're a customer. They know the products. They might know the product better than you do, right? And they're gonna resolve questions, and they're gonna turn up and do this work, and no one's employing them and telling them they must be here. There's no adherence schedule, and there's no, that's the way the gig economy works. And I always use analogies just because I've got a very simple brain, but it goes back to that whole principle of Uber, right? Or should I say any other ride sharing platform out there? But the concept's the same, which is if there are a load of flights coming into Los Angeles airports, there are a load of Uber drivers waiting to pick them up, because that's how they earn their money. And it's also how they earn their money around their lives. And when there are more flights that come in because there's been a diversion from another airport, the Uber driver will hoover it up. They fight over each other for the work. Now, the killer thing here is that they get rated. The second you leave that cab, you give them a rating or a tip or feedback. That rating is their personal currency on the platform. And we use that in exactly the same way. So you are driven not just because it's the way you earn money, but because there's that direct lineation between, if I do this job and I do this job well, I get rewarded, guess what I'm going to do? As opposed to, and I'm not saying this is for everyone, but what I can say without causing offense to anybody is my first ever job was in a contact center. So I had no passion for the brand. It was, for those listening in the UK, if you remember Dixon's and Comet, if you bought something from that shop and then you needed to call for some after care or like parts and accessories, you might have been lucky enough to get through to me, or unlucky enough. And I would have, helped you with some accessories or, warranties and all that sort of stuff. But that was my job. It was my overall salary. I turned up for work, I did my job, and when the buzz went, I went home. Now, if you change that to saying, right, well, you've got to do 80 interactions today. If you do 80 interactions a day or 50 interactions today, this is the amount of money you can earn, but only if people have actually said, yes, you've done a good job here, and you get resolution. Watch what happens. And this is what we see across the board. And this is the bit I love about what I do is whenever we go back and we look at the performance and we just watch what happens, we always get the same thing that comes back, which is that we are outperforming outsourcers or
Yeah.
in-house contact centers the
Yeah.
vast majority of the time. And it's that the fact that where there is demand, there is supply. The gig workforce can absorb way more than any fixed resource model can, because a fixed resource model can only deal with 20% probably. If you cancel training and you pay a bit of overtime, that stuff. With gig, they can just grow. They flex. It's quite unbelievable it works. But the fact that they get an instant kind of feedback and that rating on the platform, that's their personal currency, which allows them to come back, allows us to give them more work, allows them, we can promote them to do other work outside of just answering customer inquiries. So we have gig guys and gig gurus. I always trip over my own terminology for that, but experts that have demonstrated themselves to perform at a really high standard, then can help train or onboard other experts that come on, and they can also act in a QA role as well. So then they do quality feedback on the other rating. So yeah, it's a wonderful way that the whole thing works, but it's definitely down to the fact that it's if I do this work, I get rewarded, and the rating on the platforms will drive performance.
Yeah, so you're sort of saying that there's a big difference between choosing your work location, your working time, and the brand that you're working for compared to just catching that bus and going into the contact center then.
Yeah, if you if you take the work to the people as opposed to ask the people to come to work, and those people wouldn't normally be able to work in a fixed way, even working from home, right? If there is a fixed resource model, either it's insourced, outsourced, or work from home, and there's still an expectation to turn up to work and work hours and shifts and that sort of stuff, you're still in a fixed resource model. Doesn't matter how you look at it. When you give people the flexibility, they work just as hard, if not harder, but it's the old school like method where I've got to tell you to come to work and I've got to get you there. They've got to be, I've got to watch what you're doing. But if you leave people to have flexibility, yes, you get some bad actors over time, but then everyone does in-house systems as well, in contact centers as well. But it's very quick to find those and very quick to politely ask them to go and do something else because they're not employed, right? The only reason you're here is to do an amazing job, and if you do an amazing job, you'll get rewarded. If you don't want to do an amazing job, then you won't get rewarded, and there's no opportunity to continue earning, and that's the fact. And there is no shortage of people that want to work in the way that we deliver this model.
Yeah, yeah. And is that one of the main pushbacks that you get when you go in and talk to a client that's used to more traditional BPO? Is like you said, one of the first things they say is, how do you manage the people? How do you train them? How do you get them to show up for work? But what about things like security as well? I mean, how do you sort of explain that you've got people all over the country, maybe even in different countries, and they're accessing customer data, for example? How do you sort of convince them that these are not employees, but they're going to be talking to their customers?
Yeah, well, we have different levels. So we have experts. So in terms of security, there's a couple of sort of areas really, but we'll take the Pepsi challenge with any InfoSec officer and any of the and we have done, and we've never failed. So I always say, look, if you're worried about security, if we've got customers like Microsoft, Google, and Sony, just think about how stringent they are, and we've passed all of those. With I would say flying colours. It's hard yards, but everyone does, right? And we passed all those. Never had a problem with it. So from a data transfer, retention, anything to do with that, no problems whatsoever. All of the ISO accreditations and all that wonderful stuff. But the pushbacks generally come from, so if you're, experts, are they going to see, personal information? And it all comes down to how, so contacts come into our platform. Our platform can do a number of things. Firstly, it can filter out anything that's sensitive if it's going to a group of experts that haven't passed, if you like, the criteria to be able to handle sensitive information. If they have, because it all depends on how we design the service. We have experts that could do anything an agent can. Another one of our catchphrases. So digitally, I should say, experts can absolutely do anything an agent can, and that's two things. One, they go through all of the ID&V during their onboarding process. That's all done on our platform that any outsourced agent would. In fact, sometimes it's more than they do. So that proves who they are, know where the person is, where they live, all that stuff, which means that they can handle sensitive information. And then secondly, if we need them to access internal systems, then we have a clever piece of technology which effectively locks down their machine and then hops onto any remote working technology that exists anyway. So it's exactly the same as a work from home agent. And we're doing that today with major brands that are now experts, and they continue to outperform outsourcers in that way as well. So it's always the biggest thing is like what I mentioned earlier about, so they're not employed, but they're going to do just as, if not a better job than my agents that I've taken through 6 weeks of training. And we say, yeah, and the only way to prove it is to turn it on and watch what happens.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you were talking before about the thing to do with AI taking over the simple stuff, and then the contact center handling the more complex inquiries, and and everyone getting bored of that discussion. But I mean, along those lines, it seems that what you're talking about is offering something different. Like if you're talking about the continuation of different types of customer problem, if a large percentage can be handled by better AI, like Gen AI chatbots, then the ones that need to go to a human, it feels almost more natural that you would kick it out to a human that you're paying based on outcome, rather than needing all that infrastructure there to handle the stuff that AI can't handle.
Yeah, I think so firstly, we are absolutely not averse to AI, and we're using it ourselves. In fact, only next month we're going to be going live with our own form of automation. We start off so this is for the experts. So we've got two automation streams. So, and then I'll thread all this together and hopefully make sense about what you just mentioned. So the first one is that we have an AI QA function. So historically, and I've no doubt this still exists in many, many contact centers, when you chat or you call, when everyone says, this call is going to be recorded or this interaction is going to be recorded for quality purposes, the reality is that the quality team is probably getting to 1-2% of the contacts to actually perform the quality reviews. So we've now created a number of experts that are entirely AI. We create their personas. They then are on our platform, and they are given the role of a quality assessor. And they start off in a passive mode. So at the moment, the way things work is those experts that have met the criteria are invited to become gig guides. So they're able to handle customer inquiries, but they're also able to go through the quality framework and rate other experts according to whoever clients we're working on's own quality framework tool. What we're about to go live with now is the passive mode. So an AI expert will read that interaction and offer its own score and offer that to the expert that's doing the quality review. And if that agrees, if the human then agrees, then we'll go through. If it needs to change anything, then the AI will be trained in the background, and it will learn all the time, build up the memory. We can choose different personas, so we can choose we can have multiple different AI experts forming this role. One, we can say be direct, don't beat around the bush, be specific with your language. The other one we can say be friendly, be nice, use nice words when you give your feedback and stuff, and different models in the background, different large language models in the background, and then pull together which ones are the best. And then so we're using this combination of experts and AI in a way that allows us to not just pull the rope and go over to one thing, but to gently bleed in where it can work, and to start off with help those that are doing a function, and then very, very quickly be able to turn that on into full what we call active mode. So then we would be able to remove the function for those that are performing quality reviews. And that's the first stream. The second one is then full automation with clients as well. So in some questions, it would make sense for even in our world for there to be full automation. And the way that we think about this is that there in all instances there will be clients that will want to automate, and there's always that seesaw between cost and CSAT. And historically, and I do mean historically, because I do think we're on a wave of a new change. Historically, that's always been one's outweighed the other one. So if you remember the first direct model years ago, where they just said there's been no automation, you will always call and you will always speak to a human, and they then had, they over resourced on people, and then you get those organizations that try and automate everything, but potentially at the cost of CSAT. Now I think we're entering a new dynamic where there will be more, where the automation is on such a par with humans in some areas. But now it then comes to the point about how do you deliver it. So we believe that the best way to train these AI models is firstly about doing it in a passive way first. So to softly turn it on so it learns before you reach a confidence factor to turn it on. But also the best people to train the answers are the ones that are doing, are the experts currently right now. And what that then means is that we can have a situation where, and this is the utopian state, and this should be for every contact center. If a question comes in, you have a decision point, which is, do I want to automate this contact? Can I automate this contact, or should it go to a human? And if it goes to a human, which one? So your virtual assistant equivalent, or some form of decision routing at the front, which then decides, yep, I can handle this one, it's full automation, or no, I'm going to route this to a GigCX expert, or no, this needs to go to an in-house or outsourced agent for the reasons that we've decided and all of that. That then means you've optimized the contact based upon CSAT, and you've optimized the contact based on cost, because full automation is the cheapest, in-house agents are the most expensive, and it might just be that there's a difference there sometimes with the CSAT performance around them. So you need to give people the choice. So we're embarking on this journey as well, and ultimately what that will mean is that then the companies that we're dealing with, we can give them the option of both an automation solution and a expert solution combined, so that we can give people the ability to make the decision about where to route this contact to automation, which will be just as good as all of the other automation tools out there, or onto an expert, and then allow them to interchange.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting. I was going to sort of say, just to wrap up, maybe you could give us an idea of what you're doing in the next few months. But I think you've just kind of summarized it and said, this whole idea of, it sounds interesting that you're taking that blend of digital and human expert, but then making it a sort of seamless transition, rather than you're either with the software or you're with the contact center. So I think probably we need to talk maybe at the end of the year just to see how all of that stuff went.
Yeah, we've got some very exciting pilots coming up with our existing clients, because they're the easiest ones to go through this, and so watch your space on that one. The other sort of thing that we're doing in the next few months is it's a slightly different, well, I say slightly different use case, but we're applying the same concept but into the world of AI training. So all of the large language models are only as good as the data that's out there that's trained them, and they need vast amounts of humans. So one of the things we found when we did our we do, as you know, we do an annual report each year, and we go away and do a lot of studying, talk to some very clever people, cleverer than myself. And one of the outcomes or outputs of that is two things really. One, there is starting to become a reduction in confidence about people entering and starting off in the customer service industry. So there was I 18 years ago, Dixon's from aftercare sales. Would I still be that interested to go into that, knowing just at the pace of adoption? And the indices and the information we got from there told us that people are now starting to worry about that because they're worrying about the viability of them going forward. However, there is a massive increase on completely the mirror in the amount of people required to help train the large language models. And they might just, so not a too dissimilar type thing, but they're now training things around the collection of data, annotation of data, and evaluation of existing data, that stuff. So that's an area that we're also expanding. So we've been doing it for a little while, but we're now really doubling down on that area and using the same principle, which is that the best way to find the people that need to do that work is we believe the gig economy, because you can find them wherever they are in the world. The skill sets of people required are changing. You do need more subject matter expertise. You do need more qualifications, and there's less likelihood of those people wanting to go into an office to work. So the gig economy is a great way of finding, taking the work to the people and getting them to do that. So that's another big area that we're focusing on in the next couple of months.
All right, excellent. Well, we'll definitely book that like Christmas 25 call to catch up on everything.
Oh, yeah.
Chris, that was a great summary. Thanks very much.
No worries. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, mate.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.